was the year of the NASL. So we did travel down to D.C. to watch the NASL game, got to see Pele play there. Whenever we could, this is starting like right in 1976, we began to watch the NASL games that were being broadcast. And when I came home, I was in Ireland for 5 months in 77. When I came home that year, I remember I didn't want to come back to Pittsburgh, so I bought a 14-day bus pass when I landed in New York, and I went across the United States up into Canada and then back over to Toronto. And I remember I stopped in Portland and saw a match. I saw a match in Vancouver. And then I saw at least 3 matches in Toronto of the old NASL games. So we were following it then, and then we began to follow like the English League. And I think a group of us one year, I forget what year it was now, we would drive up to Toronto so we could see the FA Cup final because you couldn't see it here in the United States. And I think that had to be the early 80s. Okay, and then there was PB.
By the 1980s, men's professional soccer had arrived in America, but not everyone could see it. By the 1990s, international, and particularly European men's soccer was easily accessible to Americans. As a result of this growing awareness, the United States hosted a Men's World Cup in 1994 and a Women's World Cup in 1999.
We were part of a burgeoning time in this country for soccer. MLS was starting to form. Soccer was being treated differently. We did fairly well in the 94 World Cup, enough to at least stimulate people's thought process as to, is soccer something of a top tier sport in this country? So we were at the front end of that in that generation, and I think the more we watched, the more we wanted to be like those guys because they were stars on television, and to that point, we had never seen soccer stars on TV. We had always seen baseball, basketball, football, and so it was kind of cool to see that for the first time.
However, while both men's and women's leagues were founded in the aftermath of these events, only Major League Soccer, the men's league, found a home in stadiums and televisions across the country. How did the difference between men's and women's professional soccer affect the boys and girls who were, or weren't, watching?
Male players do. I think, your guys just watch soccer at a higher level way more consistently than females do. I think it's interesting. They love to play, but they don't necessarily like to sit there and watch soccer.
Here and there, mainly like World Cup, like the big events, nothing like not watching the Premier League or the Champions League. I got into that more now, just like being friends with more men's soccer players who that's all they watch. I feel a little more exposed to it, but growing up, it really wasn't anything that I was like, yes, like they're on, I really want to watch, or when are they on again?
I like Manchester United, so I watched some of that. Probably not as much as I should, I guess, but I mean, I did watch soccer, and I also watched like the women's national team and stuff.
More women's just because it was more relatable, but I felt like when I was growing up, the men's were broadcasted a lot more.
Because of the access American boys and men had to international men's soccer in Europe, their role models and inspirations were not only local, but global. In contrast, the only international women's soccer American women could watch was the Women's World Cup.
As a young player, what I experienced changed me. It changed my outlook on soccer, on life, on how to develop young players. It just seemed like, they claimed to develop the total footballer in Holland, and that's what I experienced. Like it was truly just way more than what you did on the field in that training session. It was what you were eating. It was the work with the physio to make sure you were staying healthy. It was what you were studying that night before you got ready for the training the next day. There was a language barrier for me while I was there, so it was just I was trying my best to kind of keep up with it, and it felt like a full-time job to play soccer. At home in America, it just felt like you went to practice and then went home and had dinner and you went to school the next day. It didn't feel like a job, and I liked that it felt like a job. I wanted to be in that lifestyle. So when it came to the Riverhounds and forming an academy, without question, my experiences were blended in with the experiences of all the other guys that we brought in right away. Straight out of the gate, everyone that was brought in was not from Pittsburgh. Everyone was coming from a different part of the world. We had guys from England, we had guys from Croatia, from several African countries. You just have this different melding of ideas coming together, none of which were Pittsburghese, and so.
How did watching their idols in World Cups, not domestic leagues, changed the way girls planned their future in the sport.
So the 99 World Cup was actually a culmination of everything from 1970, was it 73 with Title IX? 73 or 74? Yeah, that was a culmination of it because all this stuff was coming from the bottom up anyway. And when you look at the TV ratings and what they got at the Rose Bowl for that, this was that many of the people who were at the Rose Bowl, they weren't casual fans. These were young girls. These were girls, and it was great because what it did do. What was great about that was now for the first time they could identify with people. And that was the key thing when I brought Mia Hamm and Michelle and Grow, and that a lot of the players initially didn't know who they were. And then all of a sudden we showed videos of them, and all of a sudden they're going, oh, they're on the U.S. national team. They came here, and then the look of awe that they had with that when they got here, they were just. But that was something that was really important. So it helped us a great deal because now they would now start watching women's games. They would now start watching men's games and getting teams to support. So that was crucial.
I think when you look back, you can track. You'll see that similar in hockey. When you win a Stanley Cup, you can see the growth in that local area for youth. You see it in soccer. When the women win a World Cup, you see there be a surge in growth from the youth level on. And then that takes some years to really play out because if those kids are starting at 6 or 7, by the time they're, it may be a decade before that impacts the results. So I think for sure with success comes that. But we've seen, during our time, we've had a couple women's leagues fold during that time so that, can you carry that momentum through? The MLS has grown and they're doing pretty well. But you still have programs folding. I don't know a ton about it, but I've read a decent amount about the USL, all the different leagues that are under that are folding and merging, and I don't know totally the dynamics of that, but there's instability at all levels still. Even though there's growth, there's also some instability too. And I think the difference between the men's and women's side too is the women's goal is the collegiate model. And so if we're preparing our because you said, very few female players, even if it exists, say, oh, my goal is to play professionally, that's not their goal. Their goal is to play collegiately. But on the men's side, when you look at the European model, or even now on the men's side, their goals may be MLS, or it may be to play in a European academy. But on the women's side, that's not the same. So I don't think we should have taken the same model and applied it to both males and females, because I think the outcomes are totally different.
I decided I wanted to play in college. Professional, even now, is kind of still up in the air. It's always been a dream, I think, for a lot of girls that come to play college soccer. It's hard to give it up, especially when you make it to this level.
And then, I think the women's has grown organically, been one of the most successful programs in the world. Now, other countries have closed the gap, but I think that was because they were underfunded. I don't think they were doing the same things we were doing. So I think we were doing things at a higher level way earlier than any other countries. But even, you've seen Canada close, you've seen all these other countries close the gap with that. And so, I can't speak to what went on in the other countries on the female side, but I think they've just funded it and grown. And that's why why there's more parity on the women's side now. But I don't think that means what we were doing was broken or it needed to change. Because I didn't see it to be broken. You look at some of our top female players, I still think a lot of them play high school. I think even if you look at your Mallory Pugh, Lavelle, I'm almost positive they played high school. Klingenberg, when you start looking, if you went through that national team roster, what's crazy is a lot of them played high school. Now, I think you're going to see a shift in that because even when you read the bios of the current commitments collegiately, you're seeing less of the players playing high school. The DA obviously will eliminate that altogether. It'll be interesting to see. In my opinion, I think we're going to see a little bit of a trend where kids quit the DA after they commit collegiately and go back and play high school and play some other sports too.